out of here, Patrick Mahomes. Move over, Travis Kelce. You too, Taylor Swift. And all of Monday Night Football. We got a top 10 matchup to kick off opening day of college basketball.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your hosts. This is my guy, Andy Patton. That green and yellow is not for Baylor, for all you Gonzaga people watching, just so that you know that. And I'm Isaac Shade, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. Listen every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all you everydayers and all the great members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. It's a great day to get into that thing if you're not part of it, because it's opening day, baby. It's free to join. The link is in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Andy, I think we can all hear the excitement in my voice. It's because today is the day we've made it through the off season, and it is opening day of college basketball. And that means 22 short weeks from today, we will cut down the nets and play one shining moment and crown the 25 national champion. That's crazy. In totality, Andy, 19 of our AP preseason top 25 teams are in action today, including the first game we're going to get to. And then, folks, we're going to get you ready for a whole slate of awesome games. But we start with what's probably actually the last game to tip of the day. That's because I joked about Monday Night Football moving out of our way. We very clearly are moving out of their way, because number 6 Gonzaga, number 8 Baylor, tipping off at 11:30 Eastern time in Spokane Arena to highlight opening day. Our good friends at FanDuel have this game Gonzaga -3.5. Andy, get us ready for it.
Yeah, it's going to be an incredible game. A huge shout out to both coaches for getting this game together. We'd heard rumors that they were trying to schedule a game a couple months ago, and they were looking at doing it early in the season. We thought November 6th was going to be the likely date. There was rumors it was going to be in Mexico. They were looking at Las Vegas as an alternate destination. Things fell through in terms of what they wanted to do. And so they said, let's just play on opening day. Let's play on the first day of the season, get this season started off with a bang, because ESPN had first right of refusal, and because ESPN was absolutely not going to give up the opportunity to have this game. It means it's going to be after Monday Night Football. It's going to be on ESPN2 after the Manning cast. So that's why it's such a late start. I know it's not the most fun for East Coast fans. It's not the most fun for Baylor fans. It's a 10:30 start in Waco, but what an incredible basketball game this is going to be. Like you said, at the Spokane Arena. It's not technically a home game for Gonzaga, but it's about a mile away from campus. So huge shout out to Scott Drew for being willing to go play a game in a hostile environment. This is excellent. These two coaches have played each other a lot. This is the 7th matchup, or will be the 8th matchup between them. The last 2 have been won by Baylor. The most important one won by Baylor, of course, in 2021 in that national championship game. I'm so excited about this game. It's going to be so fun to see kind of a 2 teams that are ranked really close to each other in AP and KenPom and Torvik. Every single analytics or human model out there has these 2 teams very close to each other, but they had very different off seasons. And I think that's what's so interesting to me. Baylor's off season really mirrored Gonzaga's offseason heading into last year in kind of some strikingly similar ways. Both teams had to replace their starting point guard and their starting center, and did so by adding veteran players in the transfer portal. That was Ryan Nembhard and Graham Ike for Gonzaga. That was, of course, Jeremy Roach and Norchad Omier this year for Baylor. They both added a sharp-shooting wing. For Gonzaga was Steele Venters, who unfortunately did not play with the injury and will not play this year with another injury. And Jalen Celestine was the addition for Baylor coming over from Cal. And then they both started true freshmen at the small forward position. I'm not going to pretend that Dusty Stromer and VJ Edgecombe are the same. That is a massive difference in terms of talent level and upside and everything. But it's interesting to me that you have 2 teams, like they really mirrored each other. And Gonzaga kind of struggled early in the season last year, trying to get all those pieces to fit together, not just new players at starting spots, but, Nolan Hickman was adjusting to a new role. Anton Watson was adjusting to a new role, and it kind of took them a while. And I think that's the big question for Baylor is, how long does it take for these pieces to fit together? Roach and O'Meara are guys who've been in college basketball for a long time. They're incredibly experienced, incredibly talented players, but they're joining a team where the key returners are Langston Love and Jaden Nunn, and you have an incoming freshman in Edgecombe. There's going to be a lot of moving pieces for this Baylor team, and I think it's fantastic that Scott Drew is willing to challenge his team by playing in this environment against this caliber of opponent that has 7 of their 8 returners from last year's rotation, as well as 2 newcomers in Michael Ajayi and Caleb Battle. It's going to be a battle of a team that's experienced and has played a lot of minutes together versus a team that is experienced but hasn't played as much together. And I think that's going to make this an incredibly exciting matchup.
Yeah, and I think that is the thing for me as well, Andy. I think if this matchup were in January, maybe early February, I think it would be a much better representation of who Baylor is. Gonzaga is a team that, as you said, does bring in a couple new pieces, but for the most part, we know who this Gonzaga team is going to be. And, Mark Few is a master at knowing how to take that and ride the season-long wave. But Scott Drew does have work to do and is going to have work on his hands. It helps that VJ Edgecombe is already 19 years old. And, is not just a wide-eyed, what happens now? And also Baylor having had success with bringing in highly talented freshmen to perform right out of the gate, like a Keontae George, like an Yves Misi, who is doing great in the NBA, by the way, already. And so, Baylor and Scott Drew have that experience. And obviously, I think we've said this a couple times this offseason, Andy, but I think the experience of Jeremy Roach is going to be able to help bring him in a lot, as well as Norchad O'Meara, of course, is going to be able to help bring Edgecombe along. And you talked about like Langston Love. Yes, he's a returner, but he missed so much last year injured. And so, man, a lot of moving parts for Baylor. I'm still expecting a good game because these are supremely talented basketball players. Yeah. But I do think both the geography of it and the continuity of Gonzaga versus Baylor does give the edge to the Bulldogs. The question is it a 3.5 point edge or more to be able to cover?
Yeah, it's going to be an incredibly exciting matchup. And you talked about Baylor and Scott Drew's ability to develop freshmen. You mentioned, George and Misi and Jacoby Walter from last year as well. Sure. But they also have a tremendous history of guards coming in via the transfer portal, like Ray J. Dennis last year was a huge example of that, and they've had multiple other ones as well. And Roach is as talented of a player that they've brought in from the portal, and what he's going to be able to do in a Scott Drew offense, he's going to have a phenomenal season. Again, whether that leads them to a victory on night one against a team as experienced playing together as Gonzaga remains to be seen. But if Gonzaga does pick up this win, it's going to age really well for them as the year goes on, because I think that Baylor team is going to get better and better.
Yeah. And Andy, I think to your point about Jeremy Roach, I think we will see highlighted both on Baylor's team and Duke's team this year, just what an important piece he is, because I think he will be elevated at Baylor where, to be just blunt, I think there is less talent than he typically had around him in Durham. But also, I think Duke's going to miss him more than a lot of people realize. Anyway, Andy, the next thing we want to make sure we get to is the fact that, yes, this is a massive game, but it is one of just 4 ranked-on-ranked head-to-head matchups that we get in week 1 of college basketball. And you might be thinking, oh, that's great and that's fun. Well, look, in the last 3 years combined prior to this, Andy, we had just 3 total ranked-on-ranked matchups. We had 1 last year, 0 in 22-23's first week, and we had 2 of them in 21-22's first week. So the other 3 games this week, on Friday night, we get number 9 North Carolina at true home game for Kansas at number 1 Kansas. That's Friday, 7 Eastern on ESPN2. And then we get back-to-back ranked-on-ranked games Saturday, both on ESPNU. That will be number 8 Baylor. So involved the Bears are in 2 of these 4 ranked-on-ranked games. Baylor against Arkansas, number 16. That's Saturday, 7:30 Eastern at the home of the Mavs in American Airlines Center there in Dallas, followed by number 11 Auburn against number 4 Houston, Saturday 9:30 Eastern at the Toyota Center in Houston, home of the Rockets. So we're just, man, It's going to be a great first week, Andy. And, we have bemoaned the lack of this in recent years. And what a joy it is to celebrate getting these kind of games.
Yeah, this is one of the first shows we ever did was talking about how there was not good games on the first day of the season. And last year I think it was USC, Kansas State, which ended up being a game between two teams that weren't really very good last year. And so to see this to see Baylor Gonzaga is obviously tremendous. We're going to talk about some of the other big games that we're getting here on Monday as well. But yeah, it's not something that happens very often. And I'm really happy to see Scott Drew do it twice. And the two ranked teams he's playing could not be more different. A Gonzaga team that has 7 of 8 returners from last year and an Arkansas team that has 1 in Trevin Brazil and a new coach and a whole new team over there. Obviously, a lot of those players played together last year in Lexington, but still kind of what a way to start the season for Baylor. Hats off to Scott Drew for scheduling this way, but also hats off to Auburn and Houston and Carolina and Kansas and Arkansas for playing Baylor. Like just a tremendous slate of games in the first week of the season and a step in the right direction for college basketball as a whole.
Yay!
And like we said, thankfully, unlike previous years, we have a lot more good games on opening day. It's not just Gonzaga and Baylor. You don't have to wait until 10:30 or 11:30 on the East Coast for the first good game of the season. We're going to talk about some of those other big-time matchups, including 2 SEC teams coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, let's talk about 5 Hour Energy, because our friends over at 5 Hour Energy, they know that being a passionate fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. And it takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, celebrations, or even agonizing second overtimes, especially if the game is tipping off as late as some of these games are, which is why they have created Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made for super fans like us. The fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. And you know what's giving us college basketball fans fuel this week? It's pretty obvious. The start of the season, it is officially here. And with an 11:30 Eastern time start for Gonzaga and Baylor, we all are going to need ourselves some 5 Hour Energy. And they know that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for a tailgate, ironing out your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. And that's why the limited edition Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com and shipped nationwide. All right, Isaac. Well, like we said, Gonzaga-Baylor is not the only big-time game. It is the only game between 2 ranked teams that we get on Monday, but we got some other really fun games here, including a pair of games, that involve SEC teams. We start with a really fun and intriguing matchup between Texas and Ohio State. This game is going to be at 10 p.m. Eastern time on TNT. It is going to be at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. FanDuel has Texas favored by 2.5. Isaac, talk to me about this game.
Well, I'll tell you after I wake up from my nap, Andy. Good grief. I'm so happy for opening night, but again, just a reminder of why it should not be on a Monday. Okay, I'm not getting on that soapbox today, but there we go. Andy, yes, both of these teams are wildly intriguing to me.
Yeah.
I know that preseason Texas is ranked 19th and Ohio State, they're in the others receiving votes right now, 32nd. I actually think come March that Ohio State is going to have be more highly ranked than Texas. And I think part of that is because I'm really intrigued by this Ohio State team and what Jake Diebler, who, stepped in late last season, but went 8-3 down the stretch, is able to do. But just both programs are in an interesting spot. They both have a lot of talent, but Andy, they both have a lot of new faces for them, starting with Texas, man. You got Tremont Mark. I mean, we have seen him in action. We know what an absolute dude he is. Went just batty for Arkansas last year, albeit again a bad Arkansas team, but still. And then you bring in Jordan Pope. I keep forgetting, Andy. I have to keep reminding myself that Arthur Kaluma is a Texas Longhorn.
Yeah.
And man, speaking about uber talented freshmen, like we were just talking about with VJ Edgecombe, the Bahamanian Trey Johnson coming to Texas. Andy, I am there's so many freshmen that I'm excited for this year, and Trey Johnson is right among that group. But all 4 of those I named, Andy, what do they have in common? Newcomers to Austin, Texas, joining Caden Shedrick, who this is his second year at Texas after being at Virginia. let's remember, he started off last season on the shelf, injured a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is going to be kind of brand new for all of this. We both believe in Texas' starting five. The question, though, Andy, is the depth after that.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about I think I said this on a show a few weeks ago, but I think Texas has one of the three, definitely five best starting lineups in the SEC, but overall roster is just a little bit concerning. We'll see how the two transfers from Indiana State, Julian Larry and Jason Kent, look. I think that's a big part of the storyline for this team. If those two guys really pop, that's going to help them a lot. Kendall Weaver comes back. He was obviously a big piece last year and now has a year of familiarity in the system. But a lot of the same things we're talking about with Texas, I think, can be applied to Ohio State. They have very little roster continuity. Obviously, a coaching change, even when it is a coaching change, the way that this one happened, where they replaced him with an assistant coach during the season, went on a hot streak to end the season and kept that coach, you're going to expect a little bit more continuity, but really that wasn't the case. Bruce Thornton's back. That's massive. 16 points, 5 assists last year for the Buckeyes. Evan Mahaffey is back as well, about 4-4 for him in the front court. But after that, it's pretty much all transfers, but some really interesting one, a pair of sophomore bigs that I'm so curious to see how they look in new digs and which one of them kind of emerges as maybe a go-to guy for them. That's, of course, Aaron Bradshaw from Kentucky and Sean Stewart from Duke. They also had Michi Johnson from South Carolina, Micah Parrish from San Diego State, Keith Glover from Kansas State, a handful of other additions as well. But how the pieces come together for Jake Diebler is going to be a really interesting part of this team. I think there's some significant upside with this roster, and having veteran guards like Thornton and Michi Johnson and Parrish in the wing is going to help them a lot. But again, not a lot of guys who've played together. So it'll be interesting to see how they look at this point in the season compared to how they look later in the season, and how that goes against a team in Texas that, again, I think is uber talented and probably has a more talented starting five on paper than Ohio State. But both teams have a lot of continuity, or a lack of continuity. So it'll be really interesting to see how that shakes out on night one.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a super fun game. Obviously, as you said, there in Las Vegas. And Andy, how interesting that this game is on TNT, and just love to see this ever kind of evolving media relationship with these games. But going to be very much tuned into this one to see what happens. And man, so interesting. I'm really curious. I think Aaron Bradshaw might be like the breakout sophomore nationally this year, but we'll see what happens there. Don't forget, dude, Michi Johnson was an absolute dude at South Carolina. I'm really intrigued by Ohio State. Okay, the other game, a game between some Tigers where the Tigers are both guaranteed to win and lose. Mizzou goes on the road, true road game. This is another true road game opportunity that we're talking about. I think we got we talked about the North Carolina at Kansas one earlier, but this is the first one we're talking about for opening night. 8 p.m. Eastern tip, Andy, so early compared to these other games on ESPN Plus, unfortunately not on real TV. FedEx Forum there in Memphis. Memphis Tigers favored by 4.5. Andy, look, it's been another Memphis offseason for Penny Hardaway, but Mizzou is also coming off a rough 23-24. Set us up.
Yeah, you did a great job of doing it right there. Penny's team, a ton of transfers, a ton of talent coming into this Memphis program. Tyrese Hunter comes over from Texas, Dane Danger from Illinois, PJ Haggerty from Tulsa, Tyreek Smith apparently from SMU. We'll see. He's part of the controversy that we're seeing with Memphis right now about whether he's going to suit up or not. They also get Musa Cisse back, where he started his career back at Memphis, and then Colby Rogers from Wichita State. But not a ton of freshmen coming in for this program. We'll see how all these veteran pieces mix together. It already seems like there's some turmoil, some coaches who got let go late in the offseason, which is never something you want to see. So I'm interested in this Memphis team, but I'm not super optimistic at this point. There's been off seasons with less turmoil for Penny that still didn't go very well. So it feels like we'll see how much leeway they give him. But if this season doesn't result in an NCAA tournament bid, you got to start to wonder if they're going to continue, especially as they're like in the midst of still being pursued by the Pac-12 and everything going on there. Like, you might start to wonder if they're going to make a move there. And for Mizzou, this is a team that, they didn't win a game in the SEC last year, but Dennis Gates was really successful in his first season. This year is kind of a big, who steps up? Is this going to be Dennis Gates of last year, in which case he may not last a whole lot longer? Or is it going to look like the Dennis Gates and the Mizzou of 2 years ago? They brought in some incredibly talented players. Tony Perkins from Iowa, Mark Mitchell from Duke, That alone makes this one of the best transfer portal classes in the country. Just those two players by themselves is a fantastic pair of additions. They got a strong freshman class as well. I'm really excited to see what this Mizzou team looks like. If they're anywhere close to as bad as last year, Dennis Gates is probably out the door. But I think they got a chance to pick up a quality, true road victory on night one of the season against Memphis. And if they do that, it's going to be a lot of optimism about how the season goes for Mizzou, and a lot of stress and frustration going on in Memphis with that Tigers program.
Yeah. And that, Andy, in some ways, this is a very hot, seedy beginning to the season, because there is a world where if this season doesn't go right, we could be like this time next year, we could be sitting here talking about these two Tigers, both with brand new head coaches. And we don't want that to happen. It's like guys' livelihoods. I want to see Dennis Gates and Penny. Good grief. It just feels like there's always something with Penny. Right. And so that's what bewilders me and befuddles me. At some point, you got to look at the mirror and be like, oh, okay, maybe it's me. Right. Like there has to be some self-awareness at some point by Penny. Which hurts, right? Like we grew up, Andy, in an era idolizing this dude in his tennis shoes. And so I don't like to have to say that, but it just feels like the reality of it. Anyway, really intrigued by this game. All the same, lots of talent on both sides. We'll see if Musa Cisse plays for Memphis. He's been dealing with a groin injury, did not play in either of their top 10 preseason exhibition games because they played both North Carolina and then Alabama last weekend. And so we will see if he's out there for it. Andy, this ain't it. Because again, we've got so much intrigue on opening day. We got a 6-pack of opening day goodness for you that we want to get to, including Cooper Flagg's debut against a home state team in our first official 6-pack of the regular season. We'll get that in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on that same page where you place your bets. We hit you with the odds for Gonzaga and Baylor, Texas, Ohio State, and Mizzou and Memphis all earlier in the show. Make sure you go check those out. Plus, we got 6 more odds, or 5 of the 6 odds anyway, that we're about to give you here in just a second. If you like any of those or any of the great futures bets you can find at FanDuel, go check it all out at FanDuel.com, where, again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So never waste a hunch. Go make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. For those of you who are new to Locked On College Basketball, welcome. For those of you who might have forgotten after the long off season, here's what happens often on our Monday shows in the regular season. We give you in segment 3 what we call a 6-pack, where we just quick scattershot fire through 6 games or happenings from the weekend. Obviously, today there were no games this weekend, so we want a 6-pack, an upcoming set of games. Andy, I'll kick it off. Number 1 is number 7 Duke in their first regular season action, very interestingly enough, against Maine, 7 Eastern at Cameron Indoor Stadium on ACC Network Extra. That was very New Zealand-y sounding of me. FanDuel has it Duke minus 29.5. Andy, what's cool about this is Cooper Flagg's regular season debut against his mom's alma mater, against the school that his brother Ace recently committed to, and obviously his home state. And so really cool opportunity. Would love it if this game had actually been in Maine. That would have been even cooler. Yeah. All the same, it's going to be cool to see, Andy, all of these talented freshmen for Duke. A couple guys coming back like Tyrese Proctor. But then, Andy, I'm almost more intrigued to see how we get the veteran transfers and what they do to help bring along these freshmen quickly, like Mason Gillis, for example. It's going to be really interesting to see, and it all starts tonight.
Number 2 on our 6-pack, we got South Florida, the Bulls taking on Florida. Number 21 ranked Gators, Todd Golden's squad. That's at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time at the VyStar Arena in Jacksonville. The game will be on the SEC Network. 10.5-point favorites are the Gators. Obviously, the storyline for this game is the unfortunate, shocking passing of Amir Abdur-Rahim, which we spoke about last week. 43 years old. coming into the season for South Florida after leading them to a 25-8 record last year. Tragic story. I'm sure there will be lots of emotions for this contest in Jacksonville between these two teams in Florida. On the court, we'll see how South Florida is able to kind of respond to this. Having happened so close to the season, this was a roster that's very talented, that lost a lot of players from last year, but still brought in some key pieces, kept some guys as well. Florida's a team that I have really high expectations for this year. Our rankings will come out shortly, and by the time you're listening to this, they might already be out. I have them higher than 21st, let's put it that way, from where the AP has them. But I think this is going to be a good matchup between two very good teams. It's going to be kind of weighed down by the tragedy with Abdur-Rahim's passing, but should still be a good basketball game and kind of give us a good sense of how these two teams are going to look this year.
Andy, we've got an SEC Big 12 matchup, and what's funny is one of the teams has been in both of those conferences. It's number 13 Texas A&M at UCF, 7 Eastern, down in Orlando. This game's on ESPN+. FanDuel has it Aggies -4.5. UCF, Andy, let's remember back to last year where they had a much, I think, better than we expected first year in the Big 12. They have Dior Johnson. They've got Mikey Williams. Odd to me to allow him to play college basketball, but there we are. How does this all come together? But Andy, we've spoken so much about Texas A&M. I think A&M was a fool me once situation last year where they were picked, I think, by the SEC media to win the SEC. Obviously did not do that. And a lot of it is that they're just not very good at shooting the basketball, Andy, and that's not a good combination for winning games. And that's not just last year. Like, it's kind of historically now under Buzz Williams, Texas A&M has not shot the ball great. Well, a lot of the issue is WT4, Wade Taylor IV, who just needs to be more efficient and a more consistent playmaker and shooter. I'm really curious to see how he brings all that together. But Andy, we do, similar to what we said about Memphis hosting Mizzou and how much love we have for Dennis Gates for doing that. Big shout out to Buzz Williams for taking a true road game to kick off the regular season against another high major opponent. Great stuff there.
Yeah, the fact that two SEC teams are going on the road in true road games to start the season is in an era where we're seeing teams play fewer and fewer non-conference road games. You got to give a shout out when those teams are willing to do it. And both those teams are putting themselves in positions to potentially lose on night one against good, decent teams, but they're willing to take that risk. And they deserve some flowers for that. Our final three games that we want to talk about here in our six-pack are all part of the Field of 68 showcase put together by the folks at Field of 68, of course, to put together some quality games between some of the better mid-major teams in college basketball. All three of these games are going to take place at the Sanford Pentagon. None of them are on TV. They're all going to be on YouTube, so you can check it out there. The first game, this is going to be the first D1 versus D1 game in college basketball this season. The return of the MAC, Chris Mack and Charleston taking on Southern Illinois at noon Eastern time. Again, at the Sanford Pentagon. Charleston is favored in this one by 2.5 points. Very excited to see what Charleston looks like in the post-Pat Kelsey era. Obviously lost a lot of their talent from last year's team, but Chris Mack is a phenomenal coach. He's back in the mix. He's here at this Charleston team, and I think it's going to be really exciting to see this game, and it'll just be a reminder to everybody that we're back, that we got two D1 teams playing each other early in the day. It's going to be a fantastic one.
The next game of that Field of 68 showcase is St. Louis, new look St. Louis against Santa Clara, 3:00 Eastern. Also, of course, as Andy said, at the Sanford Pentagon. This game is actually Santa Clara, an experienced team, bringing back quite a bit, favored by 1.5. But Andy, let's be honest, everyone's tuning in to this game to see Josh Schertz's first game coming over from Indiana State, now coaching the Billikens. But everybody is here for Kareem, not Kareem, for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the guy respects himself, Robbie Avila, who we legitimately expect to be one of the most fun and entertaining bigs in the country. I just love watching this dude play basketball, so I'm definitely going to be tuned in for that one, Andy. Should be a lot of fun in that middle game.
Rounding out the Field of 68 showcase at the Sanford Pentagon, you have McNeese, Will Wade's Cowboys taking on South Dakota State, 6 p.m. Eastern time. This one is the one game that does not have a FanDuel line right now. This should be a really fun game. Will Wade is a phenomenal coach. This McNeese team overperformed last year, dominated the Southland, got a 12 seed in the NCAA tournament. And they went out in the offseason and added a bunch of high major talent, multiple big-time players coming in via the transfer portal. I expect that Will Wade's going to have this team back in the 20 30 potential win category like they were last year, back in the NCAA tournament representing the Southland, potentially on that 12 line, if not a little bit higher. We'll see how many more years after that Will Wade remains at McNeese. That's a big storyline for him this year, is whether, obviously with the show cause and everything with him, with some of the issues he had at LSU, if that results in him getting another job, because he's proven unquestionably that he can win basketball games at this level. And this McNeese team is one of the biggest risers right now in the sport. And we'll see how they look on night one with a very new look roster against a very quality Jackrabbits team in South Dakota State.
Andy, very quickly before you get us out of here, there was a whole bunch of recruitment movement. Want to point out 4 of them because these are specifically 4 blue bloods who each picked up a recruitment in the class, or a commit in the class of 25 this week. I'll go kind of in recruiting rankings order. Darren Peterson, who could wind up being the first player picked out of this class. He is phenomenal. I think he's 3rd right now at 247. Goes to Kansas. Really interested to see how he fits into what Bill Self does. The next highest ranked is Shelton Henderson, who commits to Duke. I tell you, John Shire, man, just keeps loading up in this class. But so does our guy Mark Pope at Kentucky, because they pick up another one. They've already got Jasper Johnson. They've already got Malachi Moreno, and they add to that a Caden Lewis, whose rocket ascended this summer in a major way. And so cool to see him get to do that. And then North Carolina picks up their 2nd commit in the class of 25 in the form of combo guard Isaiah Dennis. So, Andy, just always interesting to see what's happening with recruiting. And even in the NIL era, the big boys are getting a lot of the big players. And so we'll continue to keep our eyes on that.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for us today, folks. So excited. This is basically our final off-season show as we're recording this before games officially get started, of course, but we are so excited to come back with you the rest of the week, going forward for the next 22 weeks, as Isaac said, recapping games, giving you storylines, what's going on in the sport. Again, if you want to join us, hit that subscribe button if you have not done so yet. Join our Discord channel, Locked On College Basketball. There's a link in the show notes. Come hang out with us there as we're talking about all of these games. We'll keep you up to date on recruiting, all sorts of stuff going on here. So excited to have actual basketball games to talk about for the rest of the week. Thanks again for listening, folks. We'll be back with you on Tuesday. Until then, as always, apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats. Plenty of them in action tonight. And until tomorrow, peace.